Alright, what's going on everyone? So today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm probably gonna title this different from the other ones that I've been doing, because instead of talking about figures that are already in the game, I'm going to be talking about some custom figures, ones that I made, but it's a little bit different from other custom figures. So the other day, Shutterbug, the person who is working on reviving this game, he did a stream, and I don't remember who brought it up, but we started discussing the figures, or rather like figure models that are already in the game, but were never used. And there was also a list of unused abilities that were data mined from the game that are still in the code. And Shutterbug actually, I'll probably show a picture here, he managed to find the model for Shedinja, which is a figure that's not implemented in the game, but it does have data in the game, and he can access the model and use it and give it a custom wheel as well. And there's even an ability that seemed to match it called Empty Shell. Now unfortunately, Shutterbug did say in the Discord today actually that the ability seems like it wasn't completed, so it doesn't seem to work properly. So that's a bit unfortunate. But I had actually never seen this list of data mined abilities, and looking through it, there's actually a lot of really interesting things and concepts that are in this list. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up right now. It's this list right here, Pokemon Duel all data mined abilities. Now, a lot of these are in the game. I think a lot of them at the end of the list are all in here. Turbo Blaze, Terravolt. There's a lot of like the mega abilities are down at the bottom. Wimp Out from Wimpod. But there are some that are unused. And like I said, Shutterbug said that Empty Shell, let me see if I can find it. Here it is. Empty Shell. If this Pokemon is knocked out, it goes straight to the bench and gains weight instead of going to the PC. So this is what Shutterbug tried to attach to the Shedinja, and like I said, unfortunately it seemed like it didn't work. But it's neat to at least look at these things and sort of imagine what figures would they be on and how would they actually work in game, and like how would it affect things. So I created a few custom figures. I'll be showing 3, well I guess 4 actually, for some really interesting abilities, ones that I think are actually pretty impactful. So here's the first one I wanted to look at. It's called Ancient Power. Now this is actually the name of a move that's in the game that was added somewhat late, along with Aurorus and some of the fossil Pokemon. But the way these are listed, it shows sort of the effect that it applies, and then the description. So the description for Ancient Power here is, while this Pokemon is on the field, other Pokemon cannot evolve. And then of course the effect that's applied is just that the Pokemon can't evolve. And this is pretty, I think it's a pretty powerful ability. And so the figure that I tied it to, you know, it makes sense for it to be a fossil Pokemon. I chose Kabutops. Now, partly because, well, mostly because Kabutops actually has a model in-game. Maybe I'll show an image of that here as well. So this could be something that's implemented. Again, whether or not the ability works is debatable, because it may not have been finished. Or not debatable, but it just might not work, is what I meant to say. But so here, this is actually a website called dueldb.nl. This is made by Divani. So it's pretty nice for people to make custom figures and show them off. So Kabutops. Now, I also added the extra effect for it to be a restored Pokemon if it's evolved. just because it made sense. You know, all the other fossil Pokemon outside of outside of poor Armaldo has this, and the evolved forms have this if evolved clause. Now I don't think this really matters, and I don't know if it could even be added alongside the main part of this ability, but this basically just allows you to use the restored Pokemon plates and maybe some synergy with Aurorus. But I don't think this is very important, but I added it because it just made sense. But anyway, so I made the wheel based on Kabuto's wheel, because it's pretty much laid out exactly like this, but of course it's got lower damage. This is Mud Shot, and like I think it's also Aqua Jet, but it's like 30 and 20 or 40 and 20, something like that. So it's just a slightly stronger upgraded version of Kabuto, and you might be like, well, that kind of sucks. And yes, I wanted it to suck because I think this ability, preventing evolution, is really, really strong. Only against specific decks though. Not every deck is hurt by this. And maybe hopefully I can cover what I think works and doesn't work with this. So really, evolution is not that big of a deal unless you're talking about mega evolution, and this should count as, you know, blocking mega evolution. So this automatically prevents Mega Garchomp from being an issue. It prevents Mega Manectric from being an issue. What else? Your opponent can't Mega Lucario. Stopping your opponent from Mega Evolving limits their options a lot. Now, the other thing that's really important with this is status conditions. Now, in a freeze deck, a lot of the ways, even if you trap your opponent's frozen figure with Kyurem, one way they can get out of it is to either use a plate to switch it, or if it's a Mega Pokemon, they can Mega Evolve and it clears the status. But if you ran this Kabutops in a freeze deck, now, unless they have a plate that cures status, or if they have a switching plate, Mega Evolution is no longer an answer to clear the frozen status from their figure, so it's permanently stuck. And I think that's really, really strong. So this also hurts you. You can't evolve, but there are a few decks that don't really care. You know, a lot of really strong figures don't need evolution. Dawn Wings doesn't need to evolve. In fact, it doesn't. And I don't think the Ultra Burst counts as an evolution. It's a form change, so I don't believe this would shut that off. But Dawn Wings, Palkia, and Aegislash, you know, some of the top 3 figures in the game, don't evolve. And I think another deck that could utilize this fairly well is Victini. Now, a lot of times Victini decks would run Mega Alakazam, but this could be a tech in that deck, partly because then the burn that Victini applies is also permanent because of this. They can't evolve to get rid of the burn, and you know, Victini is already scary enough, but when you're burned, you get that extra miss piece. Sometimes that's really devastating for specific figures, depending on how their wheel is set up. So that's why I gave this just a basic wheel. I just based it off Kabuto, like I said, because Ancient Power just seems like a really strong ability. I didn't want this to be overbearing. Plus, it's a rare figure. Looking at the model in game, it's just got the sparkles around it, so it's definitely a rare. But I think this is really interesting, and I would have loved to have seen some decks based around this. So the next really interesting ability I wanted to look at is Foxfire. Before battling on your turn, if there is an opposing Pokemon without weight, you can switch them with your battle target. Now, the name Foxfire immediately I thought of Ninetales, but this could have potentially been an ability for Delphox or Braixen, but I tied it to a Ninetales, simply because Ninetales is not in the game, and Braixen and Delphox have their own thing already. Or, well, Delphox does, Braixen doesn't have an ability. But I tied it to Ninetales, and I think it makes sense. Ninetales in the Pokemon trading card game sometimes has abilities that let you bring up your opponent's Pokemon from the bench, so you swap them around. So this kind of makes sense for Ninetales in Pokemon Duel as well. So I think I'll go over the wheel, but I also want to bring up the board because I think there's some interesting things with this. Now, for the wheels that I designed, I took moves that are already in the game, mostly because I think, especially moves with effects, I think the text for non-effect moves doesn't really matter. Like this could be a different name. I think Shutterbug can change that. But for moves that have effects, I think Shutterbug might only be able to do stuff that's already existing. So I tried to base all of my designs off of that as well. But because Ninetales switches stuff around, I thought it would be interesting to give it sort of a marker or a status effect that you can apply to whatever figure you want. You can pull any figure from the board and give it, in this case, the Imprison marker, or put it to sleep. So in case you're unaware, Imprison is a 3-star move. Attaches an Imprison marker to the battle opponent. While that marker is attached, the attack the battle opponent spun this turn becomes a miss, and that's a marker, so it's permanently, the move that they spin is permanently counted as a miss until it leaves the field and the marker goes away. That's actually another thing I forgot to mention with Kabutops and preventing evolution, is markers can no longer be removed either. So a curse marker or an Imprison marker even becomes a permanent thing for that Pokemon, unless they can form change. But anyway, back to Ninetales. So Imprison is pretty uncommon. Off the top of my head, the only thing I know that has it is the EX Banette. Oh, and also Ralts has it. And it's kind of a slow move, but I think it's very good because being able to, well, it's good and it's not good. The reason I say it's slow is because you're making something a miss, so it's easier to knock out, but at the same time you're not actually knocking it out. But the idea that I had is that you can pull a problem figure, let's say your opponent's Dawn Wings, switch them in when you attack, and hopefully apply an Imprison marker onto, hopefully, their Moongeist Beam. And so now they have this decent sized miss on their wheel, their most threatening move hopefully is gone away, and now on the next turn you can attack and switch in something else, and put the Dawn Wings, put whatever figure you attach the Imprison marker to up against something else that has a better matchup. And that's the other thing about this ability that's really, maybe not game-changing, but can really help you fix matchups on the board. Let's say, in fact, let me go ahead and bring up the board right now. Swap to this scene, still have the game open too. But the idea is that if Ninetales is here and I have try to find a good example. Let's just say Ninetales is here and your opponent has Dawn Wings on the goal, but you have like, or no, let's say this is Celebi. Let's say this is Celebi and you have like an Arceus or something over here, and you're like, I want to attack the goal here, but Celebi is here, and Arceus can't really do anything against Celebi. So what you can do is attack whatever else, find something that Arceus can take out, attack it with Ninetales, and swap the Celebi with that figure. So then the next turn, your Arceus is set up to attack whatever that figure was. So it adds this extra layer of board manipulation that can, like I said, really helps you find the correct matchups that you need to take out problem figures. And Imprison is just a move that I think sort of, it's basically just a safe move that Ninetales likes to hit against figures. I didn't design Ninetales to be something that KOs figures. Because this ability is sort of utility, I didn't want Ninetales to just be able to pick anything off the board and KO it. That would definitely be too strong. Like if this was just a huge gold piece, like if it had Arceus's wheel, I think that would just in general be too strong. So I wanted it to be somewhat of a utility wheel that's a bit slower. Like I keep saying, it's slower because it attaches this marker, gives it a miss, so now it's easier to take out, but you know, you didn't just gain a whole ton of advantage immediately. Now, I also gave it Hypnosis, and this is a move that Ninetales can learn. I also tried to make sure that the moves were canonical, I guess. And the idea I had with Hypnosis was to make this sort of a two-turn play. So let me actually go back to the board again. The main idea I had with Hypnosis is just that if you're able to land it sort of closer to your side of the board, or at least in a position where your opponent can't tag this sleeping figure, then Ninetales is able to move over and attack and swap something else and leave this figure here asleep, because there aren't that many good figures that apply sleep. You know, Morlul and Shiinotic apply it the easiest because they have Spore, which is just a big blue attack. Unless I'm forgetting something, I don't think there are too many figures that put something to sleep. Too many strong figures, I should say, that put something to sleep. So I thought it would be nice to have that option. And it also gives Ninetales the ability to move through something if it puts it to sleep. And what's actually nice about this as well is if your opponent has another figure sort of infiltrated on your side of the board, what you can do is, you know, either stay here and attack or move through and attack, but when you attack you can swap the sleeping figure with something else, so that now if there was something threatening you in this vicinity, wherever Ninetales is, you can swap it with the sleeping figure, and so now it's somewhat of a helpless figure sitting there that hopefully your opponent is not in a position to be able to do anything about it. So because I believe this ability, yeah, it says before the battle, so swinging into a sleeping figure or even a frozen figure, although I don't know that you would use Ninetales in a freeze deck, but if you did, sleeping or freezing, you can swap them with anything else and they retain that status, so that you can place sort of that useless figure in a position where your opponent has a harder time getting it back. And lastly, of course, I gave it Fire Blast. Now I made it 150. 160 is kind of, at least in my head, is kind of the benchmark for, you know, top level damage. Obviously, things like Arceus hits 170 on Judgment, and Palkia hits 170 on Spatial Rend. But again, I thought of this figure as more of a utility, and 150 is strong enough. Even with no chain levels, you're going to survive a chain 10 Aegislash, and 150 will outdamage some other stuff. It outdamages a Mega Lucario. And this is a really strong Z move, of course. I mean, 300 is excessive, but it certainly gets the job done. And lastly, I was very happy to find this, Gleam Eyes. Before this Pokemon battles, you may switch the battle opponent with an opposing Pokemon that is adjacent to the battle opponent. And opposing Pokemon adjacent to this Pokemon deal minus 10 damage. Now, Gleam Eyes is the description for Luxray. So obviously if you've seen my videos, you've seen my backgrounds, I really like Luxray. And so I was really happy to find this, and I think this is a really nice ability as well. And I designed Luxray hopefully not too strong, but I wanted to give it a strong wheel that's not overbearing, at least, because I think this ability is really nice and would be really nice on pretty much anything, as long as it had a decent enough wheel. So let's go over it. I gave it Thunderous Blow. This is a move that I believe only Raikou has in the game right now. Unfortunately for Raikou, I think it only hits 80. And I think this is a really good move. Obviously it's gold, and the battle opponent and a succession of Pokemon adjacent to it, excluding this one, become paralyzed. So it's essentially just the Electric Z move on a basic move. And it being gold, I wanted to make it gold simply because, you know, I wanted this figure to be good, of course. But I made it 120. So you reduce your opponent's damage by 10, you can make this chain 10, so at best, you're technically hitting 140 if Thunderous Blow is maxed out. And 140 on a gold, I think is, you know, I suppose it's fair, because the reason I think that is just because that's what Aegislash hits. Arceus hits 150, and obviously Rayquaza hits 140. So that, for me, that's kind of the benchmark for a strong gold. A strong but okay gold. You know, if it was like 200 damage, obviously that's too much. But I thought this was okay. And I wanted it to have purple. I really wanted it to have purple. Now again, I don't think this is too strong, but I think it is really strong. It's really good when a figure has both gold and purple, because that makes it hard to Z move. If you hit it with a purple Z move, you have this huge gold that can potentially KO you. If you try to hit it with a white Z move, Roar is here and can, you know, knock you back, and you don't knock it out. So having both of these makes it less susceptible to Z moves. I still think a white Z move is probably better here, just because the purple is smaller. But in general, figures that have both are really tough to take out. Or at least more, it's riskier to Z move a figure like this. Mostly, like something like this. Now, this wheel is not too strong. It does lose to a lot. Celebi is a good answer to this. It's not affected by Roar, and Grass Knot beats everything else on the wheel. And obviously Arceus is nice for this. A turn 1 Dawn Wings can beat this. And obviously 4D Drive on Palkia beats everything here, and Aegislash Blade Form beats this. Because even if Luxray can technically hit 140, that's only when you're up next to something. So an Aegislash from range will still outdamage this. Or it outdamages the gold and obviously beats the purple. But yeah, that was my reasoning for 120. And that's why I thought it was okay to have both the big gold and purple, just because it still loses to a decent amount of the strong meta figures. And then Wild Charge is just there. This, I guess technically is sort of the signature move for Luxray. Now it could, maybe it would make sense if Wild Charge also gave you weight, but I don't know. I thought it was alright, just because there are several figures that hit 160 with no drawback, and Palkia hits 170 with a positive effect. So I don't know, take it or leave it with the weight or not. I think either way it would be fine. But this is just how I designed it. So looking at this and the ability, being able to, you know, swap two figures that are adjacent, I think this is, it's another utility ability, I suppose, like Ninetales, but obviously it's only adjacent figures and not anything anywhere. But this is still really strong, and that's why I gave Luxray more offensive wheel, because unlike Ninetales, I think this is meant to actually KO stuff, or at least cause some disruption. So let me switch back to the board here. Now, it's very common for your opponent to set up like this and have their Shuppet figure, maybe a Celebi, maybe Marshadow. If they're running Tapu Koko, it might go here. But it's common for your opponent to have a 3MP figure here, so that if you try to move up and attack this figure and you don't succeed, this figure can just move over and now surround you. However, Luxray can somewhat get around this. Not entirely, but you at least mitigate the risk of getting surrounded. So I would only do this if you have at least some sort of defense setup around, because the idea here is you can attack this figure and swap it with this weaker 3MP figure. Now if we go back and look at the wheel here, this has good matchups against most runners. Again, like I said, this does not have a good matchup against Celebi, like a lot of things. But against any other 3MP figure, against Marshadow, you always outdamage it. Against Tapu Koko, you always outdamage it. What else would you see? I suppose, what's it called? Silvally? Silvally? Whatever it is. This beats pretty much its entire wheel as well, unless it lands Swords Dance, of course. But the idea here is to mitigate, or at least remove, the chance of getting surrounded. So you can swap this and attack the weaker 3MP figure, and now this figure is probably 2MP and can't move through. And even if the 3MP figure survives, you know, it can move through and stuff, but you're still safe. And if they do that, they're also giving you the lane to move up afterwards. So being able to swap and disrupt their setup like this, I think is really nice. And obviously the other big situation that this is good in is just attacking the goal. Because if this figure here is something that Luxray has trouble with, hopefully you can swap it and better deal with this figure here. Like maybe, again, maybe this is Celebi and this is Dawn Wings that's already been in a battle. You can actually outdamage it and hit it with your gold to KO the Dawn Wings, although of course it can change forms and whatever, but the point is you can pick the matchup that better suits Luxray, and if it's a figure that you're worried about jumping over you, hopefully Luxray can swap something that can't. And the other thing about this setup is, even if you're KO'd, like maybe this was a Celebi and you managed to land Thunderous Blow but they landed Grass Knot, you're KO'd, but Thunderous Blow paralyzes all three of these figures now. And so if you're running, maybe you're running Thunderous, so now all of these figures purple is a miss. Or if you're running Mega Manectric, they all have -1 MP. So again, being able, like, attacking connected figures, I think is the idea behind this ability for Luxray. And I really like it. I think it's really interesting. This and Ninetales' ability, I think, adds a lot more strategy and sort of field disruption. The only, at least what comes to mind right now for field disruption, you have Gardevoir with its purple attack. You can swap stuff and give them weight, or you have squared attack on Gothitelle. But both of those are tied to purple attacks, and these are abilities that let you move stuff around. And that's actually really unique, and I would have loved to have seen these implemented in game. But anyway, that's it. I just wanted to sort of show off some of the abilities that I found really interesting and the figure designs that I thought went along with them somewhat well, as well as what maybe some of the strengths of those abilities were. And it's always interesting to look at these things, but I think it's especially interesting that it's possible that these things could be added to the game, because they're technically already in it. Again, unfortunately, the ability that Shutterbug tried on Shedinja does not work, but that may not mean that all of them don't. So hopefully with some more testing we'll be able to figure it out, and even if the abilities don't work, maybe I can make some figure designs for existing abilities and attach them to these figures and see how that goes. But anyway, that's it, and thanks for watching.